I'm really talking about four major myths of the fall of South Vietnam. As you know, once the U.S. combat forces left, the South Vietnamese were left on their own to face a rather formidable North Vietnamese army. And unfortunately, because the country fell in such a rapid fashion in March and April of 1975, these sort of myths have accrued around the South Vietnamese, and it really sort of played into sort of the sort of poor image that the ARVN and the South Vietnamese had in the United States. So the idea here is to attack at a level that undermines the South Vietnamese, but doesn't draw the Americans back in. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's got to make those attacks just strong enough to keep draining the South Vietnamese, while at the same time he's building up his forces, but doesn't draw the American bombers back in. And so he's got to do that very carefully across the country. So, as it turns out then, that this whole thing down in the Delta with Lê Duc Anh is really not true. Because Lê Duc Anh had told the General Giap and the B-2 Front Cosvin that the reason he was continuing attacks was because the ARVN forces were continuing to attack him. They were shelling him, they were pushing into his areas, they were ambushing his soldiers, when in fact that wasn't true at all. It was Lê Duc Anh pushing forward, and the ARVN guys were basically sitting in their outposts doing nothing. So, as you can see, it's pretty obvious that, based on this last quote down at the bottom, that the North Vietnamese really had very little intentions of ever abiding by the terms of the Paris Peace Accords. And in fact, it's not in the book, but I found this out later. I just found here recently a decree by their Central Committee that was going to, it was dated 5 February 1973, to continue infiltration down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Actually increase infiltration on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, even though the Paris Peace Accord specifically prohibited any further infiltration. So even within a week, they were planning on violating the ceasefire and the Paris Peace Accords.
Yeah, it says, what lessons can be learned from the U.S. relationship with Vietnam from 72 to 75 as we disengaged our major combat role there as compared to doing so in Afghanistan now?
That's a fascinating question. I'll actually be writing an article for the American Legion magazine on this very point. But basically, I think the main thing was the psychological support to the South Vietnamese and concurrently to the Afghans is that we are not abandoning them. If there's still a residual American combat force there, something that's got a little teeth into it, and there's still ongoing American aid that's well targeted. As long as I think the Afghan people still think that they have us backing them, I think that will give them the strength to fight the Taliban. Because many of the South Vietnamese looked upon the North Vietnamese as going to be ultimate victors. There was so much propaganda that they were going to take over once the Americans left that a lot of them believed it. And once they started seeing the world abandon them and us abandon them, then that created a tremendous psychological shock to them and created the crack in morale.